Now, I know exactly what you're thinking when you're looking at a trend. You pull up a chart, price is rocketing, and immediately your brain starts thinking, is the trend overextended? Is price too high? Should I buy the pullback? Should I fade this move? Now, they sound like legit questions to ask, but none of those questions actually tell you whether the trend is really going to continue or whether it's going to fade. Now, the real question is in fact much simpler, and it's what I'm about to show you in this video. See, most traders think that trends start because of chart patterns, while in reality they don't. Trends start because the market latches into a story, a fundamental story. Maybe it's rate cuts, maybe it's inflation, maybe it's central banks divergences, recession fears, geopolitics. But the point is the same. And listen to me closely here. The chart is showing you the move, okay? It's showing you how price is moving. The story is actually causing the move. And if you don't know the story, if you don't know what's going on behind the chart, you can't make an informed decision on whether to follow the trend or to fade it. So I'm going to give you a framework right now that will completely rewire how you see trends. Here's the secret. Now, a trend begins to form because of a fundamental sentiment. That sentiment is the engine that pushes price higher or lower, okay? That makes a trend go bullish or a trend go bearish. Now, I'm going to show you how you can find this narrative in a moment later into the video, but for now, stick with this logic. Let's say you know the story. Now, once you know what's actually driving the trend right now, you gotta ask yourself, is the fundamental story driving this trend right now currently likely to continue or not? But okay, hold on, let's do this properly. Let's say there is a large bearish trend on the dollar driven by the Federal Reserve cutting interest rates. The question in this trend becomes, is the Federal Reserve at this point going to cut rates further or keeping rates very low anyway? If yes, you got a reason to believe the trend will continue. If no, you've got a reason to believe the trend will fade. Now, you got an informed reason, okay? You're not just thinking, okay, 2 bearish candles, 2 bullish candles, well, the trend is going to fade. No, we're understanding what brought the pair down so far, and is that story going to continue or not? Now, if you've been around for a while, you would probably know that this was the case in 2020, for instance. The dollar was weakening and risk assets were flying because the Federal Reserve had cut interest rates to pretty much zero and was keeping them very low and actually ongoing massive QE program. Okay, so we know the story behind the trend. Now, the question to trade isn't, is the chart overextended? Is the RSI oversold? Whatever. The question is the Federal Reserve at this point going to continue keeping rates low, continue the quantitative easing program? That is the question to ask. Well, let's see what Jerome Powell has to say about that in June 2020.
So, we're not thinking about raising rates. We're not even thinking about raising rates. So what we're thinking about is providing support for this economy. We do think this is going to take some time.
He's going to keep rates low for as long as necessary, pretty much. They're not even thinking about hiking rates. And they're going to provide ample support for the economy as much as possible for as long as needed. So, back to the main question. Is the Federal Reserve going to keep interest rates low? Well, we understand that Jerome Powell has just said yes. Going to keep rates low for as long as necessary. So what this means for the trend? The same story that brought the dollar down here, the Federal Reserve cutting rates and keeping them low, is going to continue. Now we know, we have an informed opinion on how the trend is going to continue. And that's the secret, okay? But let's forward this a couple of months. Same year, 2020, later in November 2020, the question is still the same. The Federal Reserve has kept interest rates low for all this time. Now we need to ask once again, is the fundamental story sentiment currently driving the trend? So we understand the Federal Reserve keeping interest rates low and undergoing a massive quantitative easing program. Is that likely to continue or not? Well, once again, How do we understand that? Well, let's hear Jerome Powell, what he has to say about that.
With regard to interest rates, we continue to expect that it will be appropriate to maintain the current 0 to 1/4% target range for the federal funds rate until labor market conditions have reached levels consistent with the committee's assessments of maximum employment, and inflation has risen to 2% and is on track to moderately exceed 2% for some time.
So, once again, rates are going to stay low for as long as needed. So once again, the path is set. We understand, we have an informed opinion on the fact that the trend is likely to continue. Why? Because the same fundamental story that has driven this trend for all this time is continuing to be the same. And there you go, okay? You understand where I'm going here? This is so important. This is the pillar of what fundamental analysis is. Let's get one step deeper. Step one, as you understood, is to identify the fundamental story driving the move. That is the first thing to do. It's very simple. Ask, why is this pair trending in the first place? Not technically, but fundamentally. Now, I understand this is where traders freeze because they don't know much about fundamentals. They don't know how to understand actually what's going on behind the chart. They don't know the story behind the chart. And obviously, I understand if you don't know much about fundamentals, you cannot answer this question. You cannot answer what is going on behind the chart right now. What is driving the trend right now? I get it. So nowadays, you can get that questions answered by pretty much AI. You can use ChatGPT, anything you prefer. I personally have created my own custom trained AI, which is available on the VisaMariaFX terminal for the private network members. It's trained specifically to ignore the noise and spit out the facts as we need. But whether you use this AI or ChatGPT, the point is you need to work out just one clear sentence. So if you want to pull this off, here's the type of prompt that you can use. You'll find this prompt pinned in the comments below, so you can use it just to copy and paste it. Now, in this particular tool with AI, we don't need to actually use custom prompts. We just need to ask, what's going on behind the chart on EURUSD? Why is EURUSD trending lower, higher, and whatever? But if you're using like ChatGPT, try to use this prompt, but actually refine it a little bit, okay? So I'm looking at EURUSD, which is currently in an uptrend, whatever. Based on the current macroeconomics, central bank policies, geopolitical context, explain the primary fundamental reason for this trend and summarize your answer into one paragraph using this format. The trend exists because the market believes in X. Now, this is gonna give you some sort of answer. It's not gonna be perfect. You should refine on this prompt, but the point is simple. You need to understand exactly what's going on behind the chart, okay? And in the EURUSD example from before, with the Federal Reserve in 2020, the answer to that would have been obvious. There was no AI back then, obviously, but the logic would have been the same. And the answer would have been, this trend exists because the Federal Reserve is keeping interest rates low and doing a massive QE program. Suddenly you see behind the chart. Makes sense so far? Okay. So if you want to use this every week, here's the checklist. Before you take a trade, ask 2 questions. First of all, what is the fundamental story driving this move? So identify the engine behind the chart. Use AI, use the prompt, you talk with ChatGPT, whatever. Figure out the why behind the chart and then move to point number 2. Once you understand what's going on behind the chart, you gotta ask yourself, is that story likely going to continue or not? Look at the upcoming data. Okay, understand obviously the central bank's manner. I've talked this extensively in other videos. The central bank cares about inflation and labor market. So look at the upcoming data. Look at inflation, the labor market. Listen to the central bank speeches. And if the data supports the narrative, the trend is fuel. If the data contradicts the narratives, then the trend is getting exhausted. Now, that is it, okay? 2 questions that allow you to know what you're doing so that you're trading the reason behind the move, not just the shape on the chart, okay? So this framework essentially fixes 2 big retail problems immediately. First, it stops you from fading trends too early, because at this point, you're gonna be thinking, well, should I fade or should I not fade this trend? You don't have to guess based on just a candlestick, okay? You can have an informed opinion. And second, it actually stops you from chasing trends too late, because, if the story is actually going to fade, you shouldn't chase, okay? You have a filter. You're no longer asking, is this pair up too much? Or is it overbought? Is it oversold? Whatever. You're asking, is the thing that pushed price so far here, is this thing still in control? That is a far better question to ask. And once you start thinking like that, you see trends differently. So the next time you see a strong move in Forex, a strong move, whatever it is, it could be gold, it could be the S&P 500, whatever it is, don't ask whether it feels overdone. Okay, ask this. What is the market trending on? Is the reason that started this trend in the first place likely to continue, or is the story getting exhausted? If the story is likely to continue, if the context is likely going to stay the same, so the Federal Reserve is going to keep interest rates low, or it's going to whatever, you got to understand what's going on behind the chart. Once you understand what's going on behind the chart, once you understand what brought this particular pair from here to here, the same exact reason that brought the pair up here, is that story likely to continue or not? Could be geopolitical, could be central banks, could be interest rates, could be whatever it is. That's the framework. So if this is simple enough for you to put into action right away, let me know with a like button and subscribe to get more actionable fundamental frameworks for your trading.